So let's start with the first question. What have you both found most helpful about the process Joka and Avi took you through? Who likes to start?
Well, I can start. I think what was helpful is that the tools were actually provided. So when we were doing our initial implementation, Avi talked about paradigms, and he talked about the importance of uncovering paradigms in your organization. And we went through like, what is a paradigm, how it gets created. And so we had some introduction to that, and we understood about paradigms.
Yeah.
But then what he led us through, and so at that point, we really were breaking paradigms down more, though, by service area or by department to look at them that way. This time we looked at the whole organization. What is the organizational paradigms that are being held in place? And what was helpful about that is that we included non-service people as well as service people. So we had like corporate people, IT, finance, and they were able to provide a different perspective, I think, than if we just had service people in the room.
Yeah.
And then, so because we had that understanding of paradigms, we could talk about what it is. But then what Avi gave us was a tool to actually go and host the conversation with all of the staff. And I found that tool helpful to be able to look at what is the paradigm? What are the supports and structures in place that are keeping the paradigm present?
Yeah.
And what is the positive paradigm? And then how would we know we got there? Like, what are the structures and supports? We spent so much time on the conversation about what is the paradigm supporting, like what are the structures and supports that are supporting the negative paradigm, that we never got to what the positive one should be. But people were like, we're going there next, but people were really, really engaged in the conversation. They could give so many different examples.
Okay.
So not only did he give us the tool, he practiced with us. So we were able to see him use it first, and then we were able to role model what we were going to do after what he had done with us. So it was a parallel process.
Yeah. Okay, so you're mentioning a lot of things. So the organizational paradigms, to go into that part, and then the tool that you have got to host the conversations with also, all the people in your agency, and the parallel. So, role modeling it. If you look at that, Julie, how has this been helpful for your organization? Because this is all the things that they did, but how did it help your organization from your point of view?
Do you want me to take that, Anne, or do you want to talk about that?
I can kick in.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I would echo a lot of the content that Julie offered in the first part of the question, and specifically to your part B of the question. I think how it was helpful is we knew the parts, or I feel like we had understanding of the parts in the beginning. So we knew we learned sort of about paradigms, how they can be positive, how they can be negative. But we didn't have a really firm grip yet on the SOS methods, or the learning methods, or those kinds of things. And I think it got to be a really sort of confusing time for us trying to figure that out. What was different for me sitting in this latest process with Avi and Joka was that we had more understanding of the SOS learning methods, and the fact that it wasn't just a service delivery. So it wasn't just, investigators looking at it or family service people looking at it. Deliberately going to the non-service areas and incorporating them into the conversation and hearing their examples when we were breaking that negative paradigm down.
Okay.
Really solidified it for everyone in that conversation in our representative small working group. So we had a long list of examples of, despite not wanting to have that paradigm live and be strong and be the sort of foundation that we were operating with, you could see all of the parts and where it kind of reared its head and played out in the organization. So then we all took that paradigm, that exercise with the tool out to smaller groups and facilitated that conversation. And by being able to offer a couple of those examples that maybe was right in people's service area or completely outside of people's service area, but they were able to see that, like, this isn't just about the social work part of our organization, it's about the legal part and the administrative part and the support service part and the investigation part. And we had examples everywhere, and it just brought everyone to that conversation in the same place, and then able to move it forward. So I think that was how it was most helpful. We were able to say, this is an organizational paradigm that influences and steers all of us, and we want to break it down. We want to flip it to be a positive, and this is how it impacts each and every one of us individually and collectively.
Yeah, nice. So you're very detailed about how it was done and what they did and what you were able to do with it to make it really practical, and not just like talking about paradigms and not changing it really. So if you would have to take one example and we would say in the Netherlands.
Okay, it's okay. I've got Dutch friends. I know, yeah.
And if you would have to take one example that was most important for you, can you take me along a little bit in one of the paradigms or one of the examples you had and how that went?
Okay, so I can talk about one of our service examples. Was because our paradigm was the people in most positional authority make the decisions. They've got the final say on decisions.
Yeah.
But yet we talk about wanting to drive decision making down to the frontline level, to the people who have the most information and the best information, the best knowledge. But we have structures such as, we call them risk intelligent forums, where workers and supervisors will bring clinical issues, bring more people to the conversation. And what we realized that we had embedded in our organization is that it's not a RIF unless a director of service is there. So you automatically bring in the hierarchy. So you can't call it a RIF unless a director of service is there. What that negatively reinforced then is that decisions can't be made if a director is not there.
Yes.
And when you get into the conversation, the director of service or the executive director, whoever is most senior, has the loudest voice. And so as you're considering a situation, the person with the highest, the person closest to the top of the page on the org chart is the one that makes the decision.
Yeah.
And then as we were trying, so we had that structure made, but then we were also saying, you know, if you're the frontline worker or if you're the supervisor of the case, you know so much more than I do in terms of detail. And so I want you to tell me, you know, what do you think should happen? But yet we have this overlying structure sitting there. So it then became, you know, the director needs to bless the decision. Basically, so I go to the director to make the decision. And it got really, really confusing for our staff because we were saying one thing and really, really wanting it to be that way and believing in it, yet structuring ourselves in the complete opposite way. And then pushing and encouraging people to make decisions in a different way, even within that hierarchical structure. So that was one example from the service side. Another example that really, and I think this one really helps people understand it. Our IT manager, she talked about, you know, IT licenses, which get, you know, approved and purchased for a year or for a 3-year contract, whatever it might be. Yet every time the monthly bill comes in to pay the monthly portion, she had to get extra approval to pay that bill because the amount of the bill was outside of her authorized spending limit. So even though we had organizationally approved it for the next 3 years, she still had to chase paper every month in order to get the monthly charge paid. So it was little, I call them little, but they're huge, little, really tangible examples like that. When we
Also from
started
the
to,
non-service side, like
yeah,
from IT.
yeah, that people were really able to, I think, put all the pieces that we've been doing over the years together to say, okay, now I get what they've been talking about with paradigm shift. I heard them talking. I know what a paradigm is. Theoretically, in my head, I know what a paradigm is, but I don't know what they're asking me when they're asking me to think about how do I change my practice, or how do we want to change the organizational look at things so that I can change my practice. So by being really specific about those service and non-service examples, it opened the door, I think, to people's minds to say, okay, everything's falling in place, and now I can have the conversation about what's holding me back, what's supporting me to be the kind of worker that we talk about wanting to be as we're embedding and implementing science of safety. But we've had these barriers that I don't think in the beginning, Julie, like, even though we were talking about paradigms and we knew paradigms were in the way, I don't think we could really articulate it in the specifics that we've been able to get at through this most recent process with Avi and Yoka.
And Julie, what would you say has been the most important one for you that you've seen?
Well, let me just talk in a theoretical for a minute, and then I will give specific. So, like, I knew when it came into the role that I really wanted distributive leadership. And I talked to the senior team about distributive leadership and where decision making should really lie in the organization.
Yeah.
And we had lots of conversations about it, but we didn't actually know how to get there. Like,
No.
I knew that something wasn't right, and I knew that not all decisions should come to the top the way they were, including things like where people sit in the office. Like, that's just kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And so the paradigm, the work that Avi and Yoka did with us gives us the tool to be able to shift that into true distributive leadership. Now, I'll give you the two, they seem like really small examples, but I'll give you the two that were kind of profound to me.
Yes.
One is that we used to require letters to be doubly signatured. Nothing could leave our office without both the worker and the supervisor signing it. And the workers were like, okay, so we have the authority to apprehend a child, the most intrusive measure that we can take, and you trust our judgment to apprehend a child, but you don't trust our judgment to sign a letter and send it out of the office on our own.
Yeah.
And the other example was grocery cards or gift cards. Like, we have these $25 gift cards that workers can go and take out to their families if they're in need. The process that they have to undergo to get a gift card for $25 was ridiculous when we uncovered the steps that were happening and the permissions that were needed to be able to take that gift card out to a family. And so, to me, those were two small examples, but just totally amplified. Those in positional authority are going to make the decisions.
Yes. Well, if I hear both of your stories, it's really impressive and amazing how you were both also able with your team and your organization to, to turn this around and to be so open and to talk about it. If I would ask one of the workers that, used to have two signatures, or the thing with the grocery cards or gift cards, and what Anne said, that the decisions always needed to be with the highest person on the on the chart. So what would they say that changed for them by you guys doing all of this work? What would the people on the front line say how this helped them?
So a couple of things. I think what they've told us about the letters is that they have more time. So the letters used to get held up waiting for the supervisors to review and sign them.
Yeah.
And now they can just go out. They feel trusted. So there's a sense of trust.
Yes.
In their skill and ability.
Beautiful.
So like simple letters like, I want to come and meet with you, needed a double signature. They now feel like they are given the authority to manage their case, their family in the way they need to manage it without having to wait for a supervisor. So I think it's for me, what I've seen is the trust piece.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think? So that she's more time, the trust, they've been given the authority.
Yeah, I think I've heard two things from workers. One is mirroring what Julie was saying, which is empowered and trusted, and they feel appreciated for the confidence that we are trying to pass them. At the same time, they're sort of unlearning the ways that we've been doing things for so long, and they're acknowledging that there was some level of comfort in lots of those situations where you had people of different levels of authority in the organization in on the decisions. And sometimes that can be a really safe place to sit in, to say there was a whole bunch of us there, and lots of those people are more senior in the organization, and they thought that was the best decision. And so if we get challenged on it, I'm not alone in that decision. And the conversations I've had with workers who say, like, I'm sort of missing that safety net, or I'm afraid of losing that safety net.
Yeah.
And I've reminded people that, there is always the ability, and there are lots of places where consults happen based on our standards and child protection standards in the province, and the supervisors or directors are always available to touch base with and run something by if you're wondering. But they are, the family is the most expert, and workers and supervisors follow that in terms of access to information and knowledge of situations that they're assessing and making decisions on. So I think some of our staff are in that transition period of, I like it and I really, really want to go there, but I'm still a little bit apprehensive. And we're working through that as well. But overwhelmingly, people are saying it felt really punitive, and we see the light, and we also see the leadership of this organization acting in the way that they're talking, as they're pushing us to think differently about how we make decisions, and they're changing structures, and they're wanting to be able to do the work differently, and asking us how that would work. And they're very appreciative of that, for sure.
So it sounds like they're in transition still, you're saying, but it's making a huge difference for them.
Yeah.
What would you both see, or maybe even know, is the difference for the families you work with? That this kind of work that you're both doing, and your leadership team, I think, is doing, it's transitioning to the workers, but it's also probably transitioning to the families and the children and the social other networks from the families you work with. What would they feel or see that is different because of this way of working?
Two things come to my mind immediately when you ask that question. I think by removing some of the administrative barriers, I'll call them administrative barriers. So even something as simple as waiting for 2 signatures, that speeds everything up. It speeds processes up for workers, which therefore automatically translates to speeding things up for the families. I also have heard lots over time about families asking workers questions, and workers saying, I have to go back and talk to my supervisor about that. And then, so that also stalls. And I often thought, I wonder what families think about that, when, the families do come out with the ability, holding so much authority, legislative authority. And if they're pressing pause and having to come back and check so many things, what sort of feeling does that leave the family with? And by us taking away some of those barriers, it allows a more smooth and streamlined conversation and movement for the casework that gets done between the family and the worker. Those are the two that come immediately to my mind.
Yeah.
I would say the same thing as Anne. So when a worker feels confident that they're going to be supported in their decision making, and they feel like they have the authority to make those decisions without barriers in their way, they then can have a better relationship with the family. they aren't, so what Anne's talking about is kind of a parallel process, which we have been trying to break, where a worker will say, oh, I need to talk to my supervisor. Like, how undermining is that? And exactly what Anne's saying, how does a family feel about that?
Yeah.
So I think the way a worker now is able to interact with a family, that they're confident in their decisions, that they know they'll be supported in their decisions, that they have structures in place, they have the paradigm shift, that they know that the decisions are theirs to make, will translate into better service for families, because it should be able to translate into more seamless planning with them in the moment, not having to do this, I'm coming back to check with my supervisor, which to me makes them lack credibility in the family's eyes. Like,
Yep.
oh, if you're not confident, like, then how can you really be telling me how to keep my child safe? Like,
Yeah. But so when I hear it, so from the side, it also feels like it's a huge undercurrent that this whole work of your organization brings you, because it has to do, of course, with the authority, but also when the workers tell you they feel more trusted, you know, they feel more in their own authority, they feel more empowered, they are responsible more for their decision, and the decision is laid with the person that has most knowledge. So if you bring that back to the families, even parallel, and that's maybe also where signs of safety comes in. The main thing we want is that the families, children, and their network are in the middle of the decision making, assessment, planning, everything we do.
mm-hmm.
So if you guys think about what you're doing with your workforce, you know, parallel is actually what you're wanting to have with families, what they.
You're right. That is totally. We want families to be empowered to make their own decisions.
Yeah.
To feel like they have the authority over their own lives to do what they need to do. And it's our job to help facilitate that. Like, that's the next shift that we're working on, I think, is the facilitation of that, as opposed to workers thinking they have to own safety.
Yeah.
No, they don't need to own it. They just need to facilitate it.
Because you were both referring a little bit from all of this work to signs of safety. Can you help me? What is the most important link you both see to doing all this work on the paradigms, the organizational paradigms, and the link to signs of safety? What would you both feel and say?
Well, I see this work as cultural, organizational, cultural work, and I don't think that you can do signs of safety. So I'll just be honest. We were struggling, I think, I'm interested in Anne's perspective, but I think we've struggled for the last couple of years. Like, we're on to embedding, not implementation. So we're on to the next phase of our signs of safety journey. And I think we've struggled to figure out how to embed. And I think it's because we had so many organizational paradigms that were standing in the way of us being able to embed. And so then people got into, I guess I'll use the word cognitive dissonance. Like, I'm standing with a foot in both worlds. How can I actually implement signs of safety properly when my world doesn't support me to make the decisions that I need to make with a family? I think that this paradigm shift goes a long way to moving us then towards that embedding of signs of safety.
Yes.
I would totally agree. I think as you're implementing, you're learning new things. We were learning about some of the different processes, trying them out and having success, and sometimes having not that much success, and going back at it and doing it again. I think where we're at, and most particularly the having come through the family service practice intensive, it really in black and white showed me what I knew in my head was happening, which is we talk a lot, Julie and I talk a lot about 1 foot in the old way and 1 foot in the new way.
Yeah.
And people are not opposed to signs of safety, but the barrier then that gets in the way is signs of safety take so long, it takes too long, I don't have time to do it, you're asking me to do all these things. And that is all true. But when you're not letting go of some of the old ways and then trying to do a new way, it is on top of instead of in place of, and that's where we are at, I believe. And just that amount of work that it takes to let go and unlearn one way and be open and embrace another way. There's nobody that disagrees or argues or doesn't agree with the foundational pieces that signs of safety, is built on. And at the same time, they're a little bit sometimes reluctant to let go of what's familiar to them, which is our old way of doing it. And so that's sort of where we're stuck. I stopped talking about implementation about a year ago and said, we've got it. We've got the information. We need to drive it deep into our service delivery. And one of the biggest learnings of the family service practice intensive, people think that they're doing safety planning, but they're not doing all the pieces of signs of safety that make safety planning complete.
Yeah.
So that was really humbling to see. I knew it was coming, but not everybody realized that. And so when you see it in black and white then and think, holy, there's so much more to do, but we have to unstick, I deal a lot in analogies in my head, and I feel like we're stuck in the mud, in the old safety way, and then sort of trying to get down the path in the signs of safety way. And we gotta unstick ourselves to be able to be free to go. And that's where we're at right now.
And you feel also, and that wouldn't have been possible if you were not doing all this organizational cultural work. No.
I think the organizational cultural work, and there's lots of reasons why the timing worked out. This is where I believe that we've been able to make realize the most gain in that work, and have it be slow and steady instead of have a conversation. It's like start and stop and abandon and start again and do something different and start again. I think we are on a very slow, steady path right now. And I believe that the organization is being very closely watched by our staff, which is what should happen, to see whether or not we're going to stick with it. And we're having tough conversations. We're doing tough things. We're opening pathways and encouraging people to step into them that were really scary to step into over the past little bit. And so I think people believe that, and they're just wanting to trust it, but they're also watching us to make sure that we're really doing it. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I think it's impressive, all the work you've been doing. It took a lot of effort and hard work from all of you as a group. And Avi said to me, they deserve a lot of praise. That's literally what he said. So if I can ask you both, my second question, what are you both most proud of what the team, or I would like Anne, if you could say it about Julie, and Julie, if you could say it about Anne, that would be nice. So about the team in general, but maybe something specific to the other. What you both are most proud of, what you did, what your colleague did in the transfer of these learnings into your daily work. Because it's good that Avi and Joke, give this impulse, but in the end, it's all up to how you transfer it to your daily work. So maybe Julie, I start with you.
Well, I can talk what I'm most proud about Anne about in this work is her tenacity. Anne is the one who has been like, when people have questioned and people have been like, what are we doing? Like, does Yoka and Avi really know what they're doing? Like, Anne has been the one who's been like, we just need to stick with the process. Yep, it's not making sense to me either, but let's just trust. Let's just stay with it. So she's been kind of like the guiding North Star, like, just keep going. We'll be tenacious about this. We'll do it. I think as a leadership team, what I'm most proud about is that we were open to hearing tough things about ourselves and our organization. We all participated. So every member of the leadership team participated with all staff to hear what they had to say about the organizational paradigm, which was really negative about us, right? So positional authority, they're the leaders in the organization are the ones making the decisions. That's a bit tough to hear, and a bit tough to hear about the way how that has been experienced by staff.
Yes.
And so I'm really proud that people were open and willing to engage in that. You know, we could have had people who shut that down and just said, I'm not listening to this, but
It's
nobody did.
very easy to do that. Yeah. Thank you. Beautiful. And what are you most proud of? What the
So
team?
I would agree with what Julie said about the well, with all of it. Specific to Julie, what I have most appreciated and I believe has made has had a huge impact is that as executive director, Julie is with this process all the way through. So it can be really easy and has happened that sort of, you know, an SOS lead in the organization is maybe given full rein and say, you know, go make it happen and do the work and have the work happen. And I'm not sure that there's been a meeting that Julie has not been at in org alignment. I think the only one, if she missed any, was because she was on vacation or what have you, which is completely understandable. So I really felt an investment and a dedication and commitment to the work alongside all of the rest of us. So I guess I would just say she was in it with us. She was in it to win it with us, and not putting that, you know, prioritizing other things or you know, wanting it to be successful and hoping for it and requiring it, but not herself being part of the process. That's not her style. And I think that I know that I really appreciated that, because I have been saying what Julie said, which is stick with it. It's going to come together. I've been here before in these conversations or in these processes, and for a little bit, for a couple meetings or for whatever, I'm thinking, okay, I don't understand the puzzle, and then all of a sudden the puzzle is a beautiful picture. And so I was saying that, and Julie was supporting that and reinforcing that alongside me, and I think that was key. People are watching all of the time, and if we're really sort of putting our money where our mouth is about changing culture and being in it together, it needs to be all of us, not sort of assigned to just some of us. So that's, I've really, really appreciated Julie over the last year, and her letting me hold her hand and walking beside me with it. So that's been great.
Really nice. Thank you.
I think that's important.
Yeah.
I think the executive director has to do these things. Like, I was at the practice intensive. I joined a group with staff.
Yeah.
I think if an organization really wants to say they're a signs of safety organization and they really want to implement, I think the executive director has to demonstrate that willingness, that they're going to engage in all those processes. So I really appreciate Anne for saying those things about me, because I think some executive directors think it's easy. I'm just going to not go to that meeting because really, what does it like? Doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Very
I appreciate that you notice that, because I do very intentionally.
I know you. Yeah. Oh, I've noticed it. And I think too, the Julie talked about this too, but the vulnerability of being willing to hear, like there's been no feedback that has been unwanted or squashed or silenced, or like we're sort of putting ourselves out on the table wide open to say, tell us, like, let's do the 3 columns, right? Tell us what's working, tell us what's not, tell us what behaviors support our ongoing learning, tell us what gets in the way, and tell us when it's us, because we need to get out of our own way to have this happen and have this happen well. And that's been permeable from top to bottom, right to left, back to front, up to down, everywhere. So that I think has been very helpful and key to our success as well.
Yep. Okay, thank you. So last part that I wanted to ask a few questions about is all around the world we try to implement signs of safety, and of course there are often struggles. And the main feedback we used to get, or still get, is that signs of safety requires such a culture shift, and it's hard. We don't have time, just as what you said, actually, Anne. And the other important topic is that people, of course, if you invest your time, your money, your effort into an implementation, you want to have it sustainable. You want to, keep on to it for the future. Keeping these two important topics in the back of our mind, what is something out of your experience that you both had within Bruce Gray in doing all this work that we could learn from internationally? What would you, or could you advise us? And other regions, maybe?
So I think I've told Avi this. I think if we had a do-over, I would have started with the culture work. I would have not had this. Okay, so two things. I would have started with the organizational paradigm and the culture work that we're doing now.
Yeah.
The other thing is, this was like a senior team decision that we were going to implement signs of safety. I would have tried to make it a more inclusive decision-making process. I think if we really want to live the values of signs of safety, we would have done a different, and I only know this in hindsight now. In hindsight, we were operating from the way we were used to operating. Okay, we're going to do a new service delivery model, and we're going to agree to signs of safety, and we're all going to get on board, and we're going to champion it.
Yeah.
I would have done a different change methodology. I think I would have started engaging frontline staff, and here's what this model has to offer us, and tried to get their buy-in before we ever did what did we have, 5-day intensive or like a training.
Yep.
So instead of top down, I would have tried to do bottom up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Julie, to go into a little bit of you're saying as first thing that comes to your mind to advise us internationally is to do the organizational and cultural work first. Can you say a little bit more about why would that be important for all of us to do and to know?
Because I think you have to create a learning environment. So child welfare is a fear-based, and I think that fear holds us back from really embracing things. So people are motivated because they're worried about the worst outcome for families. They're worried about a child dying. And so then that sitting in that fear makes you behave certain ways. And unless you can change that, people are reluctant to embrace a methodology that they see gives power to families to make decisions for themselves because they don't trust families.
Yeah.
And I think you've got to embed. So that's one thing. The other thing is we have a culture that's afraid of making mistakes because mistakes lead to bad outcomes.
Yes.
I don't know how you can have a learning environment unless you're willing to make some mistakes.
Yeah.
And so you've got to counter that before you try to bring in signs of safety, or else people get paralyzed because they think, I'm going to make a mistake with this. I'm going to go and try something new, and it's going to go badly, and a child's going to get hurt, or a child's going to die.
Do you feel that is the most important thing why in a lot of other regions it's not so sustainable? Do you think it's because of these two important things, like being able to make mistakes and the fear-based work we're doing? Is that what you feel should be addressed first, and you have to?
I think that's some of it, but the other is this hierarchical way that children's aid works.
Yeah.
Without autonomy. So we've been working hard, and our paradigm shift is working hard to give workers autonomy to be able to make decisions.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's to give the team autonomy to do what they need to do. And there's a number of pieces that we're putting in place organizationally to support teams to have autonomy to function as a team.
Yeah.
That is not normal. That is not child welfare here in Ontario.
Yeah.
Child welfare in Ontario is still very hierarchical in their decision making. And I think it flies in the face of signs of safety.
Yeah. Yeah. And the
And
second,
so then I think you get into that conflict as a worker. Here's the old way of doing things. It's very hierarchical. And if nothing in the organization changes to support you, you have no choice. You know, like we're a system, right? Like any system, it's going to revert back into the old ways unless there's new ways to support that person to practice differently.
okay. Yeah, that's a really important phrase. It's always going to go back to the old ways. And that's also what I always experience if you don't put anything in place for the new.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not supported by, and you were saying beautiful things at the beginning of the interview, that it's actually in small things in daily practice that are supporting this way or not.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes even unconsciously, you don't even know that these things are all out there. That, yeah. Okay.
The workers know, though. If you ask them, they can tell us.
They can tell.
We discovered.
Okay. And if I would ask if you could give advice to us, and so we could all learn from you guys, what would you say is most important?
So I'd pick up on one of the things that Julie said. The concept of a learning organization, we really struggled, and I would say probably still struggle to grasp that. So organizationally, because what it turned into, as Julie was talking, was I'm not able to make a mistake, or if I make a mistake, it's because I'm learning signs of safety, and therefore, you know, that's the reason. But we, despite, like, I need to go back and think about how we launched that conversation and how we supported or tried to support that learning of that concept, because what people were missing is that the learning part of a learning organization comes from, like, not that there's never going to be consequence, but you have to be doing the pieces. So, and that's where you get the learning. And because people were stuck in the mud with one foot and trying a couple things out with another foot, it wasn't complete, I guess. So that would be one. If I had a do-over, it would be, I agree, starting earlier and digging in on the culture piece and figuring out where are we on our own way, and let's get that out of the way so that people have a more clear path, an easier path to make the change, and understanding what a learning organization really is, because I don't think we had that sorted. The other thing that Julie and I have talked about, and it's kind of and it's not what we did, because there were organizational factors that were putting pressure on us, but having this done off the side of someone's desk doesn't pay it the attention and the respect that it really needs to be done, as well as what I would want to do it. And sometimes I feel really successful, and sometimes I don't feel as successful, and I slow down and I drop things and I don't move things forward. And that's when the other parts of my job or the other organizational needs get really busy. Yep. And I get busy with those because those things are being assigned to me, and it's my job to produce or to move other parts forward. And ironically, we talk about and we did, like, you know, implement an enterprise child protection information network system. We spent crazy amounts of money organizationally and provincially on that CPIN system, and continue to support that system. And that's where we document our work. And we made the right choice, even though, as Julie shared, we maybe didn't do it the right way in terms of top down versus bottom up. But I think we made the right choice to take on signs of safety and implement a different service model that we truly believe will be better for our community's kids and families and staff, but we didn't resource it. And that seems crazy making to me. And Julie and I kind of go around and around that. And I think, you know, overall, I'm really happy with where we're at, but I can see the parts of the implementation that are lagging or slower than I want to be, or I didn't do as good of a job as I would have wanted to on that part, because I was being pulled in different directions. So dedicated resources and staffing would be my advice to organizations. Figure out how that can be done so that, or support staffing to the person who has the lead or something different. Because I dropped some balls when I got busy with keeping other balls up in the air, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Did I forget anything? Is there anything important that you both think should have been said or should have been asked?
I don't think so. I think for me, I think I have, when I was sort of considering this AI, I think I've been able to share everything that I wanted to make sure I shared.
Okay.
I think I'm good.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I thought your questions were really good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How was it for you to do this and to talk about this in this way?
For me, it's exciting to share. I really like having these kinds of conversations, and so I enjoyed spending the last hour with you, kind of participating in this and talking about. It's kind of a time for us to reflect. Like, I don't think Anna and I have had a chance to kind of reflect on how this organizational alignment process has gone. So you gave us that opportunity. So that was great.
It's... And for you?
I think as the lead, I think about where I need to go and what parts aren't done yet. So I know this in my brain. Avi and I have talked about this 100 times, you know, slowing down and looking back and being appreciative and reflective on the parts that, and the distance that we have come is a really important part of the process that we don't always spend enough time thinking about. So it's been a really good process for me. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And I thank you both, because I feel honored to be able to ask you both all these questions and to learn from it on the side, because I take a lot from, you know, I'm not so much in, I know Avi has done this way of, together with Yoka on the focus on, we need to change their, talk about values and their paradigms and their culture in the organization. We can't land science of safety otherwise. So he's very busy with that. That's really his, I think that's his power, and that's what he brings. And I can learn a lot from what you both are saying and the advice you're giving me and my colleagues. So we could even bring it to other regions, and I'm very grateful for that. Thank you very much.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, man.
Okay.
So we'll get those consents signed and back to you.
We'll get them sent off.
Okay.